Hello guys, so in this video we will be looking over most of the Angular's features, kind of like a crash course. So we are assuming that you know what a module is, what a component is, and how to handle routing. And we will discuss the rest. So let's showcase some stuff. So we have this app component which just renders some dummy text currently. Let's first explore, I don't know, ng containers and ng templates. So as you can see in Angular, as you know, basically, we have the ng if directive to render something conditionally. So if we have some text here, we can say ng if true, and if it's true, we will see the text along with the whole element. But if it's false, we won't see anything. There is no element, there is no text. The element is simply gone. It's not like it's hidden with CSS, it's simply gone. It's not present in the elements, in the DOM structure. So this is the ng if directive. But let's say you just want to show some texts like so. Like for example, let's say you have some paragraph with text here, and you just want to render this thing conditionally. But as you can see, currently we're using a div. But let's say that this div serves you no other purpose except for rendering something conditionally. So it basically adds an extra element that you don't need. So this is kind of ugly. In order to get rid of that, you can basically use ng container, like so. What the ng container does is the same thing, but it basically wouldn't render an additional element. It would just wrap the thing and either render or not render it. And if it's false, we will not see anything, of course. So that way we avoid having an extra element. Super handy. Now the other thing that we want to check out is the ng template, like so. So let's have this ng template with some more text, like so, a paragraph. So an ng template basically wraps something, but that something wouldn't get rendered until we actually render it. How can we render that? So the first thing that we have to do, we have to take a reference from that template. How do we do that? Well, with a hashtag. And here we will say like template ref, something like that. And now what I can do is the following. I can render this template if this condition here is false. How would I do that? So currently this is true, so we just see the text, the paragraph with the text. Now I can say if this thing is false and else render this template. Using this syntax, I'm basically saying this thing, imagine it's something dynamic, some dynamic variable. So I'm saying if this condition here is true, render this. Otherwise, render this template. So now we will see some more text because we're giving it a false value. This is one way to render templates. Let's check some other ways. So let's now comment this container out, and let's see how we can render templates in other templates basically. That can allow us to wrap some reusable HTML structure and reuse it easily across our HTML file. We can actually pass that around components and so on. So we will see how we do that now. So let's say we want to render this template somewhere. So we have it packaged up, but it's never rendered. Let's render it. We create another ng template, and in order to render this template, we can say ng template outlet. And here we need to provide the template reference that we need to render, like so. When we do that, basically, whenever we have this template, it will just render this template because we've given its reference here. So we can just clone this as many times as we want, and we will see it like so. Super easy, straightforward. This is like the template. You can imagine it like a function that returns some HTML that we can basically reuse. Okay, so far so good, but how do we pass variables to that? That's an interesting point. In order to pass variables to a template, what we can do is we can use the ng-template outlet context input. This is basically a directive. And here we need to provide an object. And inside that object, we need to say like some variables. Like, so this is something that you have to remember when working with that. We have the keyword implicit, like so. For example, if we say implicit, for example, 42, which is the answer to everything, of course. What implicit does is it allows us to declare a variable like so. So now we can display this variable over here, like so. There. Okay, why do we use this implicit thing? Well, we use it when we want to, this will only work for the first variable that we have, like not the first in the order, but like there are two ways to define a variable. So let me show you those two ways, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The second way, some other value, let's say, which will be, for example, 24, like so. So in order to get this some other value variable, we cannot get it like so. We cannot say some other value like so and get it. That wouldn't work. In order to get it, we need to use like pass it like so, basically. So this means check for this variable in the context object. Now here we can name it whatever we want. We can do like so, right? There we go. But the idea is that you always need to say that it equals to the specific key. And the difference between that and the implicitly passed value is that the implicit variable, you don't need to specify which key it comes from. It just comes, you know. So this is useful when you just want to like pass one variable maybe, and just you don't care to have a specific key bound to it. You just need to access it whatever. So we can always like change this to like, for example, ABC, like so, and we can always access it. So whenever we change that here, this is the only place we touch, like so. So that's the difference between the implicit and all the other variables. So any other variable that we want to access, we always need to use the equal sign, and we need to specify which is the key that that variable lives on, basically. So this is how we can render templates with variables, pass variables, and basically encapsulate behavior inside templates. So something really important to remember is that if we have the same variable that we're defining here, for example, let's say variable like so, okay, and let's define that in our component to be equal to, for example, 10. So now when we access that variable, it will still show 42. Why? Because it's the same variable in our component, and basically we are overriding it. So this is like shadowing, you know. So this is not actually recommended. but basically when you have a variable that's defined in your component and you want to use it here, you can use it. But if you redefine it like using that or this syntax, then it will just take the value from here. So that's basically how it works. We can say let's var here, and we can render this. Actually, this is a reserved keyword, so we can say let v, for example, and let's render this variable over here. So now we can see it renders both of them. So just remember that these variables here, if they have the same name, they would just shadow the variables in the component. Anyway, was there anything else over templates? I'm not really sure. We have component outlet, but I'm not sure what was that used for, so I'm not going to be showing it. Anyway, we saw that we can render a template in the HTML using this syntax. However, let's say you want to render some template from your TypeScript. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to create a view child to that template. So we create a view child, and here in the selector for the view child, you need to pass this hashtag that you've created, the reference basically. We've called it template ref. Now we give it a variable name, which will also be template ref, and it would be of the type of template ref of element ref of HTML element, like so. And it tells us that this can be basically undefined, so we can just use this exclamation mark to assert that it will be defined. And in order to see that it's actually assigned, we can bind to the ngAfterViewInit lifecycle hook, and we can console log it, like so. So now here we can see that we have access to it, and it has some stuff. So how do we render that on the fly using TypeScript? Well, each template ref can be rendered using this method. So we can say const embedded view ref equals to this template ref dot create embedded view. When we're creating an embedded view, so here this thing that we just used here is not actually ideal. Like we have this native element and so on, but actually when we want to create an embedded view, it's kind of dubious. Why? Because it expects us to pass an element ref, right? But we actually want to create that with some variables. Let's simulate that. So let's now create one element. Let's say a div, and let's use the hashtag to get it in some view child. Let's say this will be content, like so. Now let's get this div, like so. Like so. Okay, let's just console log it to make sure it works. There we go, we can see it. It's somewhere here, but we cannot actually see it because there's nothing in it. So we want to now take this template, for example, which template? This template. We want to take this template and we want to create it on the fly, pass some variables inside, and put it inside the content div. How do we do that? Well, now we want to, instead of having this as our template ref type definition here, we can create an object and we can say like implicit, which would be of type number, and we can then say some other value, which will also be of type number, like so. And now, when we're calling this embedded view ref dot create embedded view, we can just pass it like so, implicit, for example, 55, and then some other value, 66, for example, or let's go with 77, like so. And now we can try to do something, and I'll show you that it doesn't work. We can basically say embedded viewref dot root nodes at the index 0, and this is basically an HTML element here. We can just console log that for now. So now we can see that we have a paragraph here, but there is nothing inside that paragraph. Why? Well, because when we create it like so, we need to then call embedded viewref.detect changes. So now, when we detect changes, we can see that it has its inner HTML set. So if we actually lock its inner HTML here, you actually easily see the difference. So if we don't detect the changes, the inner HTML is empty, and if we do, it will actually render it and insert them inside. So anyway, using the root nodes, so let's console log the whole root nodes array. You will see that actually it just holds one element. That's why we're accessing this at the index 0, which can, of course, mean only one thing, that if you have multiple elements here, they would be on the other indices. Let's have that. Let's create some other paragraph, which will be some other paragraph, like so. So now, if we console log our root nodes array again, you would see that there are two elements, the first and the second one. Okay. Let's remove this template rendering from our HTML in order not to get confused. So now that we've created our embedded view, we need to append it to our content div. So we can say this content.nativeElement.append child, and here we can say embedded viewref.root nodes at the index 0, for example, like so. So now this code, using TypeScript, we're taking a template reference from our HTML that is not rendered anywhere. We're taking that, we are rendering it using, like, passing its variables the same way we would pass them over here, but we're doing that in our TypeScript. We're using detect changes to actually make it happen, and then we're appending the rendered element, the first one, in our content div. So if we inspect the structure, we'll see our content div with a paragraph inside. This is how you can dynamically render stuff in Angular and play with them, basically. This is like, I don't know, you wouldn't do much else. Like, we have some other properties here. I haven't actually used those. Like, you can detach the change detector, you can do other stuff, but we're not going to be looking into that. Instead, what we'll look at, let's now look at what happens when we combine that with some directive. So let's create a directive. Let's use it, let's put it in the test component folder, and let's call it some test directive. Wait a bit, there we go, we have our test directive. So now I want to put that directive on top of our ng template, like so. So now in our directive, let's go in our ng-on-init method of the directive, and let's console log works, like so. So it gets logged here. So the directive gets applied, and the ng-on-init gets invoked, even if we don't do this here. So I'm going to comment this out so you see. So now the directive still works because it's just attached to the template. Even though the template is not found here, it's never used, the directive is here. So what we can do now is, in the directive, because it is attached on top of this template, it will have its template reference injectable through the constructor. So we can basically say private read-only template ref, which is of type template ref, and here we can just say some object like so, and we can console log that like so. So if we go to the console, we would see the same thing that we did, which what we can do now is basically we can, for example, take the reference of the element we want to render this template in. For example, let's add to this directive some input, which is of type input. Let's have like element ref, which will be of type element ref of HTML element, like so. Let's make that assert that it will be true, like so. And what we can do now in the engine init of the directive, we can move this logic over here to the directive, right? So we would accept some element like so. We would accept some element, and we will just render the dynamically create the template that the directive is standing on, dynamically create that, and append it as a child of the element ref that we've passed in, like so. So now we can basically pass in the content as an element ref, like so. And now we will achieve the same result, but just a second. When we pass it like so, it actually isn't an element ref because this is direct. It would be an element ref if we access it through the Angular, but since we're not accessing it anywhere in, through the template, but since we're not accessing it over here, wait a second, we actually are. Never mind. We have it defined as a view child, but it actually tells us that it's not a view child. Maybe if we say this dot content, no. I think that's because let's remove that like so, and let's remove this element ref thingy from here. Just HTML element. Let's do it like so, and there we go. So now we've achieved the same effect. The reason that happens basically is because we're passing this content and it can see it over here directly. And when we're doing it like that, this is not actually yet an element ref. It becomes an element ref when we take it as a view child. But since we're just passing it like that, Angular can detect that and it just says, hey, this is just a regular HTML element. You can just use it like such. It would have to be a view child if we would say, like, for example, if we use content ref like so, and now if we come here and we say that this content is actually content ref like so, and if we do that, now we have to bring it back to the way it was like so, and it will still work. Actually not really, so maybe I'm mistaken. The content ref is actually a view child of the content ref. Okay, let's just console log this content, see what it is. This content ref actually. Yeah, the content ref is a element ref, right? Cannot read properties of undefined. This element ref. This is strange, right? It's strange, right? Because I think what happens. Oh yeah. So what happens basically? Let's actually explore that, right? Let's explore that. Let's try passing the content over here in the directive. Actually, first thing we're going to do is instead of using the ng on init lifecycle hook, we're going to use ng after view init lifecycle hook. And now, do we have the same error? Yes, we do. Maybe ng after. what other things did we have after content init? That's not the actual hook that we need, but let's try it. I don't know. G after content init. This is actually used for ng content, but yeah, it doesn't make sense here. So this is strange, right? Element ref. This is the content. We're passing the content ref, which actually we can see that it's actually an element ref when we log it over here, right? It's a element ref, it has its native element, but when the directive gets invoked, it still isn't. So this is strange, right? I'm not sure why that happens, but I'm just going to skip it. So let's carry on with ng on init. Okay, and here as an element ref, we're just going to pass like element, which will be of type HTML element, like so, and we can use it like so. This element and child, and we can just pass like element and passing the content like so. So as we can see, for some reason it just works like that. I'm not sure why, but when we are accessing it in the TypeScript through the view child, it would be a template ref. Anyway, let's get rid of that. So now what we did here is basically just a second, ng on init. So we achieved the same result by using a directive on our ng template. The directive basically takes the template it sits on, then it takes an input, which is some element, and it renders the template dynamically, and then it appends it to the children of this element that we've passed. So this is how you can just access your template in your directive, and you can then you can then play with it, render it in the TypeScript, do whatever. Now, another thing I want to show basically about directives, which is also useful, is that we can also inject the element ref, which is now element ref of HTML element, like so. And if we now console log our element ref, like so, we will see that it's actually a comment. So this is this comment right here. Why is it a comment? Well, because basically when we use our directive on an HTML element, we can then access that element through this element ref type that we inject in the constructor, like so. And when we use it on a template, we can access the template using the template ref. So basically, use it on template, inject it with the template ref. Use it on HTML element, use the element ref. So we can verify that if we put our directive app test over here and get rid of this template, and now just comment this logic out over here, just to see it go, like so. If we save that, we can now see. Now you can see no provider for template ref. So you just cannot inject that if it's not on top of a template. So we remove it, and now we can say the elements here. It's no longer a comment because the directive is used on an actual HTML element. So that's basically it. If you want it on an HTML element, use the element ref. If it's on a template, use the template ref. That's how it works. Another thing that I want to show is that you can have an ng container. It can have like some ng if, but it can also use the same ng template outlet. For example, here, let's remove this content for now. And let's uncomment, let's see this template over here, for example. Let's remove the directive from here. And we can now use the ng container to render our template the same way we did with the ng template, basically using the very same way. We can just copy these two lines and you can paste them right here. There we go. Why would we do that? Well, this basically allows us to apply some directives like ngIf, ngFor. We cannot do that with the ng template. Like if we try to apply an ngIf here, I'm not sure if it works even. Let's try. I don't know. If we see ngIf false. It actually works. So I don't know. I guess it's a matter of preference. I guess I'm not so pro to explain what's the difference between using these two, but as you can see, you can just use ng template and you can use ng container. So we can apply like ngIf, ngFor. Like for example, we can render many of them if we have like some array, like let's say numbers equals to 1, 2, 3, and now you can just say ngFor let n of numbers, and we will see this 3 times. So there you have it. What else can we explore? Yeah, we can. The other thing I want to show in this video is the ng content, basically, and the content child, content children, and view child and view children with some other elements. So now, first let's go through the view children right quick. Let's say we have this content div right here again, and our test directive will do nothing. It will not even inject anything in its constructor anymore. It will just display it works. It won't have any inputs whatsoever, like so, and we'll just put it over here. So now let's come here ng after view init, and let's create a view child, which will be the content, and let's not give it any type, let's give it any, and let's console log it. Okay, so now you can see this is HTML, like this is element ref basically. But another way to select this would be to say, instead of using this content that we used here for the hashtag, we can select it by the directive type. So we can say, maybe we can also do it like so, app test, okay. Actually that doesn't work. We actually need to use the directive type. So we can say test directive. And using this syntax, we can actually use viewChild to access the directive reference. So we access its type, its internal state, and so on. So we can use that. And that's basically it. That's basically it. So you can just viewChild / viewChildren using a hashtag, or you can do it by the type of the thing that you want to look at. For example, if you want to access that and just trigger something, you can just say, sorry, not here. You can just say like this content dot, you can just say that it's of this type right now, and that it's like so. And now you can just invoke its methods. Like imagine this is some more complicated method, and that's all there is to it. Okay, and the last thing I want to show is basically the ng content. So let's now make use of our test component. Let's come down here, let's say app test, and we can see test works. Okay, so what is ng content? Well, basically, as you can see, our component is basically an HTML tag. So what happens if we pass something in here? Something in here? Well, nothing happens. We don't see it. It just gets lost. In order to see it, we need to go in our component and we need to use this kind of a hook thing called ng content. Ng content, like so. So this is basically a placeholder where our ng content will be injected. So as you can imagine, we can just do this, and you would be wrong to. I mean, I didn't actually ever do this, but now we can see that if we copy our ng content multiple times, it would just put it once, which is kind of odd, but yeah, which brings us to another question. What happens if I do it like this? 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's leave these other things like so. Okay, so basically, if you have it multiple times, it's just going to take the last encounter and use it here. So it just gets overridden. That's it. Anyway, you will always use it once, so you don't have to worry about this. As you can see, it has some properties like selector, maybe. But I've never actually used that, so you'll have to Google that. So now use this ng content thing. And now let's say in our directive, in our component, we accept what's passed from the outside, like so, and we just render it. But let's say from the outside we want to have some div which has some hashtag like something, and let's render something here. And now, in order to access this element, we cannot access it using a viewChild, because a viewChild, actually, if you have to use the viewChild here in order to access this same component's HTML. You cannot access something that's passed from the outside using a viewChild. For that purpose, you have the content child. So we can just say content child, and for example, something which will be of type any for now, and now we can just say like something like so. And now let's try logging that. Console log this something ng on init, ng after view init will do the same. And now we have one more lifecycle hook called ng after content init. And let's see what gets logged in the console. Like so. Okay. And now we can see that in the ng on init we are able to access. We are not able to access the element, but we can access it in ng after view init and ng after content init. But what's the difference here? Well, ng after content init will get triggered because the way the component gets rendered is basically, in order to render the whole component, it basically works like a function, right? So if you have a certain function that gets invoked, and inside it you have another function, like function 2, for example, in order to return the result from that function, it will first invoke the other function, and then it will invoke this function. So this is the same way it works. As you can see, in the ng on init of this component, there is nothing. So after that, we get the ng after content init, because it will render the content because it's inside it, like so, the same way with the functions. So in the ng after content init, we now have access to the ng content. We can access it. We can do the same as with a view child, but using ng content child, because it's passed as a content. And after that, after this thing is rendered, then the outmost function, aka the component itself, gets to its ng after view init phase, where it just shows it again because it's actually available beforehand over here. So that's how it works. That's how you can use content children. You can also like have something like, for example, if we would apply this app test directive that we created, we can again access it like so. Test directive, and we can access it the same way that we accessed it in our app component, the reference using content child. And that's basically it. That's how it works. It's super simple, straightforward. So you have view children when you want to access something that's directly present here, and if it's something that comes from the content, you just use content children. That's all. So yeah. So we took a look over directives, ng templates, dynamic rendering of ng templates, passing templates over from one place to another, and so on. So for example, I will now give you, before I finish this video, I will give you a minor example what I've actually done. For example, let's say you want to create a tab set component, something super simple. Like for example, you just want to have some component which has some tabs, and basically when you click in between them, it just renders different thing. How you can do that? I'll do it in pseudocode. Over here it wouldn't work, but I'll just show you. So the approach would be something like, for example, app tab set. You will have some component which will be the tab set, and inside it you can do it like for example, you can use the following approach. You can do a component which will be app tab and pass it as an ng content. Like we're using the ng content to have this nice structure, which is kind of intuitive to the developer. This is one way to do it, to have the tab components inside, and each tab component to have some content inside. For example, 1 and 2. Okay, this is one way. The other way you may want to do it, you can use ng templates, right? You can use ng templates, and you can create some directive that you would apply to this. For example, this would be app tab, for example, directive, and this directive will have access to this template. And then you can just use this template reference inside the tab set component, and it can just hold something like this template inside its HTML. And basically it can reference the directive using content child. It can take this directive. This directive would import in its constructor the template ref, right? So it would be public, and then this tab set component will have this in its HTML. It will have a reference to the directive, and directive has a reference to the template. So you can basically say the directive dot the template, and you can render it like so. So without even rendering it in the TypeScript, I mean. So that way you can just save everything in templates, use a directive on top of them, have like 1 and 2, you know, and then using this syntax with directives and ng content, you can easily create a tab set component. And you can then like define, for example, I don't know, you can define the tab names as inputs to this directive. For example, name equals something something, and then you can access that. You can take it in your tab set component and just use it in some HTML structure elements that you can click, and so on. So as you can see, using content child / content children and using some directives, injecting templates and so on, you can build like tab sets, you can do like tables, you can build whatever. So this is all the flexibility that you have in Angular. It's really flexible. Like it's not as flexible as React, but it kind of approaches that. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and see ya.